Imagine an album so weird, so different, so compelling that it basically forces you to listen and then to listen more. Well, that's what we're talking about this episode on the Metal Ireland podcast number 17. I'm Earl Grey. I'm going to introduce you to one of the most enigmatic men in the underground, a guy you will rarely ever hear from. His name is Yusaf Parvez, but he's otherwise known as Vicotnik, the man behind Dodheimsgard. And their new album, Ad Umbra Omega, is an incredible spin. I gave it Album of the Month here recently. Just listen to this. So I had to find out more. But this podcast is also an excuse to talk to him about his other band, Vicotnik, who many of you will know and who many regard as one of the absolute pinnacles of Norwegian black metal. And we're going to dive into that interview in a minute, and you're going to love it. But just before that, a word from our sponsors from this episode, who are SD Entertainment. They've got a show coming up that any fan of AC/DC won't want to miss. It's a very special night with their drummer, Chris Slade. It's going to be at Wayland's, and it's on the night of the 30th of June before the big AC/DC gig. It's an up-close and personal drum clinic aimed at the hardcore AC/DC fan, and it provides the chance to meet, hang out and chat with Mr. Thunderstruck himself in a very intimate environment, as capacity is limited to just 200 places. Now, AC/DC have never and will never offer public meet and greet packages while touring, so this is as good as it gets for Irish fans on what may quite possibly be their final ever concert in Ireland. So what do you get with this ticket? Well, you get a Chris Slade t-shirt, you get a photo with Chris, you get a drumhead personally signed to you by Chris Slade, a signed photo, a laminate for the clinic, and a pair of AC/DC branded and Chris Slade signed drumsticks. You get the chance to ask Chris a question from the floor, from the audience while he's on stage, and you can bring 2 to 3 items of your own for Chris Slade to sign. Now, also making an appearance on the night is the Dublin AC/DC tribute band Whole Lot of Voltage, and there'll also be stalls from merch store Asha and others to be announced. So fans are encouraged to dress up to come to this night as their favourite AC/DC member and join in on the fun and the camaraderie. Now, tickets for this once-in-a-lifetime event are priced at €180. They're on sale now from www.sdentertainment.co.uk, who've kindly sponsored this podcast and made it possible. Now, back to Vicotnik. And back to this incredible album, Ad Umbra Omega. Just listening to it makes your head spin. It's an amazing collage of moods and colours. So, what was Vicotnik trying to do when he was putting it together?
It's quite a demanding listen, the album. So it's I guess the album is sort of a reaction to how the scene has developed in many ways. That the commercial aspect of the scene and caricated personas, exaggerated personas, kind of taking the center stage and the makeup and the costumes and all that. So I just wanted to make it about the music again.
Vicotnik has been around a long time when it comes to black metal and made some of its best and most interesting music. So coming back after a break of many years, what does he think when he looks around the state of the black metal scene in 2015?
After having a 20-year run, plus the black metal scene, it's also become an industry, and I kind of want to avoid the ideal of black metal become a niche, because the creativity was really the central aspect of it. And back in my day, plagiarism was kind of the highest sin, whereas now with new generations growing up, they're really looking to their inspirations in order how to do it. Whereas in my book, that's kind of the wrong approach to this.
It goes absolutely without saying that Dodheimsgard have always been their own musicians and couldn't be accused of plagiarising anybody, and that's something that really does come across on this incredibly creative new album.
It feels kind of gratifying to get your point across, I guess, musically, because one thing is sitting and making music and thinking that it has a specific feeling or an atmosphere or originality, but Another thing is actually managing to do it and managing to convey it. So I'm extremely satisfied with the responses for this album, because people seem to connect on it on the right levels, and these are all people I don't know. Even the reviews that aren't so crazy about this sort of music, they kind of analyze it correctly. And all the reviews I've read so far are really analytical, which means that the music kind of challenges the journalist to be analytical, instead of just saying, yes, this was a good record, or this really made me want to headbang. Every review I read is really analytical.
During the 2000s, many artists from Norway started experimenting with weird sounds, new drum beats, new sound samples, new effects, new electronics, and it's fair to say that a lot of that stuff hasn't really dated very well. And perhaps something that hasn't dated very well is Dodheimsgard's last album, Supervillain Outcast, and even the one before it, 666 International. They're pretty much products of the era, and I asked Vicotnik whether he thought the same thing.
I guess that's perceived a lot differently from my perspective, because I'm kind of the album's father. So I see what you mean, and that's also the risk of utilizing technology that's tied to an era, because then you kind of date your music, And so I can see your point, but I guess I'm not that analytical when it comes to my own music, and I also have a tendency to kind of let it go when I'm finished with it, and just let it be, let it stay how it is,
Fair enough, but let's just talk. Let's just talk honestly. So we have, there is 666, okay,
Yeah.
and there's Supervillain, and that's all good, but Ad Umbra it's on another level. Like, you've just taken it to something really more effective and more extreme and more meaningful. And what you've done with this is you've got a production that is really natural. So you when thinking back to the Moonfog days, you wanted something cold and crisp and like thorns and stuff like that. But this is something else. This is something that's really natural, really fluent, and really blasting. You have made the best album of your career. There's no doubt about it. I mean, what do you think about that?
I guess I like hearing it, because this is the album where I had the most personal approach to it, and where I divided the parts the least among the people, because I produced it, I engineered it, and so it's my most personal approach to music ever, and also when it comes to the lyrical content, it didn't focus around external stuff like having enemy picture of some sort, or something like that. The lyrics are quite introspective, so they're quite bold in that sense as well, because it's not that common in our music to kind of have lyrics that are showing weakness and being self-critical.
Now, this is pretty challenging stuff. It takes you about 20 listens to really wrap your head around this difficult and challenging black metal. So what does it actually take to make music like this? How does Vicotnik do it?
I was only working towards music that had the right evocative feeling. So that means practically I made a lot of themes that I deemed very good, but still ended up in the garbage bin because they didn't have that right feel. So this is kind of the first time I've just worked on music from an emotional perspective. It just had to render the goosebumps, basically.
Yeah.
And I tried to go back, in the mindset I had when I was a 15, 16-year-old kid. But this time I could bring along a lot more technical skill and understanding of music, and I could also experiment more structurally, and so it took a lot out of me actually to make this album, um, because I also wanted it to be honest, and I wanted it to portray something that was honest. So I often compare it to kind of a journey to hell, and what I brought from hell was this album.
Whenever you say, you've been to hell with this music, can you explain to people what you actually mean?
I guess it's difficult to explain because I don't really want to go into the specifics pertaining to like my personal life. But it was kind of one can call it a transformation. That like you're at a point in your life where you're kind of assessing all your memories, and trying to figure out how those memories made you the person you are, and every time you access those memories, you kind of alter them a bit, So now, when you access them like 600 times, they're not. You don't have the same emotion tied to them as you used to do. So the narrator of the album, he's kind of going through a transformation where he's. Even though he thought he was kind of an individualistic person, he's discovering that he's as programmed as everyone else. And as he kind of reached that bottom floor, he rediscovers or reconnects with himself on another level. And what he brings back is kind of the musical and lyrical narration of that journey.
That's quite interesting, because I suppose one thing that whenever people hear this, right, their first interface with the album, and indeed, their first interface with Dodheimsgard material, is Aldran. He's giving the vocal here, and he's a kind of kind of insane, kind of bonkers personality.
Yeah.
What were you hoping to achieve? Because I know you did the lyrics for for Dodheims, for Red Boons, and for code and stuff like that. What were you trying to say through Aldran in this album?
That also worked on a practical level, in the sense that the vocal spot was vacant, and that he had a real desire to come back home, basically, and we really wanted to ensure that could happen. But for a long time, I was supposed to do the vocals myself. But you also have to remember that, when Aldran started listening to these songs and reading the lyrics for this album, he that kind of also rubs off on how he approaches this job, So it gives him a certain feeling or emotion, and that's one of his strengths. He's really good at channeling the emotion that's already in the music, or how he perceives that emotion, and the same way with the lyrics. I think he performed them the right way, as they're almost like somebody barking at a congregation. If you want to connect with this album, you really have to invest in it, and that was also the point of going back to kind of the core roots of black metal and this form of music, that it just isn't for everybody, and in order to be part of it, you have to invest in it.
So the question that sort of pops up when listening to this stuff is Vicotnik being deliberately difficult when he makes this kinds of music?
I guess in one way I am, because but without knowing it, because I'm I'm inclined to do this stuff. I wouldn't be happy if I just ran through the motions and just made an album. It wouldn't satisfy me. So, but I guess it's also inherent in a difficult personality. But I'm not sitting down and thinking now I'm going to make music that's difficult just to be a difficult guy. I just think that's a natural thing when you are a difficult guy. You understand what I mean?
I do, and I suppose many of the people who will be fans of this kind of music will also be fans of what you've done in the past, and so I want to talk about that a little bit. Whenever you were composing or taking part in the Vedbøns and the music, did you realize how big an impact you'd have on people?
No, not at all, because in that era, I saw every band as original. So I thought it was no different with us, that we were any more significant or any more original than the other bands.
1994, 95, there was amazing stuff coming out.
Yeah. So I thought almost every record back then was great, from every band here in Norway, and a few bands abroad as well, like when I really picked up on black metal, I had some Mayhem rehearsals. Their album, the Mr. S, wasn't out yet, and I had some Snorre tapes, Thorns tapes, and I had the first Master Shammer records and some 7-inches, and then Arcturus 7-inch, the first Bursum album, and Dark Throne came a bit later, but that also came out, and all these albums just was the same kind of, under the same banner, the black metal banner, but they sounded vastly different. It just seemed to me that all these bands sounded different because they let their personalities rub off on the music instead of presenting themselves through a niche, and that kind of ideal stuck with me and has stuck with me. It's
funny because I don't know, it's weird, it's nearly 10 years ago, which is scary, but around whenever Mayhem's Ordo Ad KO came out, I went over and heard their listening party, whatever these things are, whatever, and I thought, fucking hell, this is really different, this is so dark, and there's a real personality in here. One thing, when I heard Ad Umbra, one thing that struck me was the drums, and I thought, wow, that is really like Hellhammer on Ordo Ad KO or Esoteric Warfare. What did you try to achieve on the drumming? Because this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first one that's not programmed drums, and you've achieved a really natural production on this one.
Yeah, the drums on Supervillain was not programmed either. It was triggered.
Okay, sounds really digital.
Yeah, it is digital, but it is played, and on 66 it was basically a mix, that we mixed then the organic signal with the digital signal, and so it's a 50% signal, you can say, whereas this time it's all natural. Yes. Since I'm trying to reach something that's kind of on the human level on this album, I really needed it to be organic.
Yeah.
It really needed that sound frame, of not being synthetic. If it was to be honest, it had to just I had to avoid that.
Long before this new album, Yusaf, alias Vicotnik, was also part of another band, a band who back in the mid-90s would push the envelope of black metal so far it nearly snapped. They were called Vedbønsende, and this that you're hearing now is from their classic album, Written in Waters. Yusaf and his writing partner Carl Michael, who himself would go on to great bands like Aura Noir and Virus, were a talented songwriting team who basically sounded like no one else at all. So many people listening to this, right, will be huge fans of Vedbønsende and Virus and stuff like that. You know, all the good stuff, frankly. When you listen back, or when you think back to Written in Waters, for example,
yes,
I mean, you guys did something truly fucking amazing. Like, there's no doubt about it. You know, this was genre defining. This was stuff that has never been done before, and it hasn't been done afterwards either. When you listen back to, or when you think back to the likes of Written in Waters, what do you think you achieved?
Yeah, I guess we put a mark on music, you know, and made something we can call our own, you know, and one thing I really appreciate with that album is that we got some fans 20 plus years ago, and they are still as loyal to that music as they were back then, you know. And I think that speaks volumes for the music as kind of something that has aged well, you know, and is kind of timeless, you know, because it's broader than just being music. It's not just notes put together. It also has some core emotion that people can connect to, both emotionally and mentally.
I was kind of asking you earlier, I didn't quite ask you explicitly enough. I was asking about what it was like to have a sort of, musical brother, for want of a better word. What was it like, making music with Carl? And I know you guys have gone your separate ways, and that's cool and everything. But what's it like making music by yourself when you don't have necessarily that kind of musical kinship anymore that you did have in Vedbønsende?
It's a very different dynamic, you know. Like before, in the early days, making music was a very social aspect of being a musician, whereas now it's a very lonely process, I guess. You know? So just there, it's a totally different mindset and a totally different approach to making music. You know, but I think that the kinship, you know, you see when you're younger, it's necessary for your development. You know, me and Carl and I, we taught each other a lot of different stuff. You know, so and I can only speak for myself, but his involvement in my life and development as a human being and as a musician is paramount. You know, and I guess as years went along, we were able to master that on our own, you know, and so, or therefore, the desire to kind of branch out of our own became stronger and stronger.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, you know, so many people in Ireland, so many people elsewhere have such a huge respect for you guys, you know, and what you did. You know, you did a fucking awesome thing. You know, with Vedbønsende and everything you've done since, it's such an awesome thing. But, you know, you guys both, you know, you weren't the happiest of guys. I mean, in terms of your own mental headspace, what went into writing the riffs that you wrote? You know, just in terms of your own, you know, the headspace that you were in.
I guess we were a bit, both of us, disconnected people in the sense that we kind of were ghosts going through life, you know, no jobs, nothing, no real attachments or anything, you know, and kind of that living day to day like it's a memory of sorts or a dream, and the music actually became the most physical or tangible part of our existence. So, and also where we kind of were able to put a language to all the stuff that was going on, I guess.
It's funny because both of you then ended up with a language that was totally different to everybody else.
Yeah, I guess we worked on a mindset that was a bit more fearless, a bit bolder, like we didn't constrict ourselves to any rules, or perceived rules, because we didn't think there were any, And if you're an artist, your job is to express, it's not to hide, So I think from a really early age, we kind of had that mindset in relation to our own art.
And listen, you yourself have come from such a different background to most of the Norwegian scene. I mean, tell us about, like, you had an upbringing in New Delhi before you came to Norway. What was that like?
No, it was a very interesting, especially in retrospective, to have a multicultural background. But that also means that I had a lot of contrasts in my life, and the contrast helped kind of define the perception of my reality, because I lived somewhere that was vastly different, and then I came to another place where everything that kind of was unnatural from the initial place was suddenly natural, So I guess also coming from a religious background, it also kind of instilled some sort of spirituality in me, whereas the choice I've taken upon myself is more the scientific approach. So I guess there's an interesting dynamic and contrast between that as well, kind of the person you choose to be and the nurturing, that's still part of you.
It's funny, I sort of often wonder that, your riffs, and Carl as well, you were so different, to whatever was going on in the moment at that time. Do you feel that your slight difference, because obviously because of where you come from, do you feel that contributed to being really on the left field from what was going on musically in Norwegian black metal?
No, I'm sure of it. I'm sure that had a part to play. I can't really put it down in words or explain it, but I'm sure it had some part to play. And also, if you look at it on a practical level, I grew up with music that sounded really different. I grew up with a lot of Indian music, Indian classical music, Indian pop music, and all that stuff. So that's kind of my early years. No Western music at all, basically.
Being an outsider in the Norwegian scene of the early 90s couldn't have been without its problems, and Yusaf was aware of the dark mutterings and sometimes outward insults of some of his rather more superior peers.
Yeah, I don't mind it, but I do agree it's just bollocks. But on the other hand, it gave me a challenge. It gave me a challenge to find kind of my footing in it and fight for the right to be allowed to define this music as well. And so I kind of found it very interesting, especially the period where the Norwegian black metal scene was kind of in fusion with the neo-Nazi scene, which was very small but still was growing in the early 90s here in Oslo, and the black metal scene and the skinheads, they kind of found a common niche, So I thought it was quite interesting to be around them, and I always made sure I pronounced my name really correctly to see what responses I could gather.
It's funny because I mean I guess a lot of people will want to know, what was that like, because one imagines that you're a fucking super talented dude. There's no doubt about it. You have made some of the most awesome black metal going, and yet that couldn't have been easy in that time.
No, it wasn't, because even if people wanted to befriend me, a lot of them felt they couldn't because they didn't want to be ostracized themselves. So, but I thought it just made everything more interesting. It just made everything sort of even a harder challenge. So, I don't know. I have a good feeling about those days, and seeing where it developed as well. That kind of a big part of the scene kind of rid themselves of those shackles.
Do you think that time has passed, or do you think there are still remnants that hold on to that kind of nonsense?
But I guess back in the day we were just kids, and whenever I scratched the surface of this skinhead thing or this Nazi or racist purity bullshit, it was quite evident that people were quite ignorant.
But at the same time, kids got arrested. Kids did jail. I mean, we think of some of the people in black metal. Yeah, of course you were all kids. I mean, we know that. But kids did jail.
Yeah, sure. But what I mean is that for most people that get tied into this, because they are young and impressionable, they often also grow out of it. And as soon as you scratch the surface a bit, it was quite evident that people didn't really know what they were talking about. They just chose it because it was an extreme way of life. And since extremity was so like a sought after quality in black metal, it kind of embraced everything that was extreme.
Yusaf Parvez, otherwise known as the enigmatic Vicotnik, is the true outsider. And the new album from his band Dodheimsgard really is outsider metal. It's full of brilliant curveballs and incredible lateral thinking, plus some punishing extreme metal.
In the last days of dreams, towards the pale array orbit, hiding inside our darkest deeds.
You can't listen to this album while doing the dishes. It's not background music. You kind of, if you're going to kind of be part of this album, you need to let go. Don't try to hold on to a part. Don't try to overanalyze it or break it down or anything. Just let go and go along with the journey. That's the best way to get into the record.
How does it feel to be one of the most foremost creative minds in Norwegian black metal?
I don't know, man.
Come on! You do know, because you know.
Every day I wake up, I'm just me. So I think it's really difficult to compare. But if I am to put my finger on something, I think that the little select group you're talking about are really kind of bona fide people. They kind of they stick out not only musically but personality-wise as well, and haven't really been afraid of going against conventions. And they had their hair anyway they liked it, or wore the clothes that they were most comfortable in and stuff like that. Even in a time where that kind of a symbol in this this genre. So I think it kind of coincides with the people, that little group of people, always been like proper individuals.
And that is the thought that I want to leave you with, being a proper individual. Because wasn't that what you got into metal for? It's over and out from the Metal Ireland podcast. See you next time.